And welcome back to the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us on a Monday evening, trade deadline eve, if you will. Trade deadline will be tomorrow at 5 p.m. Central, 6 East anyway. We will be live for you guys all day long tomorrow. Join us 8 a.m. as we're going to take you all the way through the deadline, probably an hour and a half after that. So if you want to go ahead and hit that like button on the video, subscribe to us, turn on those alerts. That way when we go live, you will be notified. In case you guys are wondering, you can also follow us on Twitter at UpsideSN. Turn on your notifications there. We do post when we go live there as well. Welcome in, Mark. Yes, I did see that Bo Bichette did go down with an injury after rounding first base. He was tagged out to kind of end the inning. Tells you this injury was significant, at least to Bo Bichette in that moment. Hopefully it's just something minor, but we hope for the best here for Bo Bichette. I'm not sure that's what the Jays are ultimately going to get. I agree with your comment there as far as a need now with Bo Bichette going on the injured list in my estimation. I think we could see them pick up a shortstop. We saw them do that with Jordan Hicks after Romano went down due to injury. Now maybe they have to do something similar here with Bo Bichette. But there's a few shortstop options that they have out there on the market. Tim Anderson is one of them. Probably be one of the better fits in my estimation. Has club control for next year as well if they decide to keep him there, if the Jays ultimately make the move. But Bo Bichette could be one of the biggest holes in the lineup for Toronto if he's going to miss significant time. They're going to have to fill that hole with somebody. Sarah, welcome back. Very quiet day for the Cards so far. We haven't seen a trade from them as of yet. We could see one here in the next couple of hours. So hopefully we'll get to see some more trade activity. We did get to see some trades get consummated. We saw that the Giants have acquired A.J. Pollock and Matthias from the Mariners. The Mariners also traded away Paul Sewald, probably one of the better closing options right now, possibly a setup guy for the Diamondbacks. We'll see how they ultimately use him, but he's probably going to be one of the best relief options that was left on the market. He goes to Arizona to kind of shorten the game for their starters. Kind of a different way than what we had expected the Diamondbacks to do it here at the deadline. Maybe instead of going for a starting pitcher, they thought, hey, a relief pitcher can have an impact on more games for us, so that's why they go for Sewald. I still think they're in the market for a starting pitcher, even after the acquisition of Sewald. They've kind of been in a little bit of a free fall as of late. We'll see if this kind of steadies them a little bit there. Another trade that was made was the Brewers have continued to add here at the deadline. Mets picking up a significant portion of the salary for Mark Canha. He goes to the Brew Crew. The Brewers have done a nice job kind of adding around the periphery of their team. Canha here. They brought in Carlos Santana. They're going to get Tellez back here in a few weeks. So once he does get back healthy, they'll have a little bit of a combination there that they can use at the DH spot between Santana and Tellez. I like what they've done. I'm still curious to see if they decide to do something big like we saw last year with Josh Hader. I don't think we're going to get any news on it until it literally happens. So still going to keep my eyes peeled for what the Brewers ultimately do all the way up until the deadline, because until that deadline passes, I'm not sold that the Brewers are going to stand pat with the way they have the roster set up with those four players we've mentioned a few times before. Christian Yelich already on a big long-term contract, having a resurgent year. Maybe they save some money, move him out in order to sign one of their three pending free agents, not this year, but in next year's free agency class. They're not going to be able to afford all three. I think best case scenario, they re-sign two. They've already soured their relationship a little bit during the arbitration process with Corbin Burns. So again, like I said, out of nowhere was the Josh Hader trade last year. Until the deadline passes, I'm not taking my eyes off of the Brew Crew, possibly retooling before the deadline. Welcome back, David. Phillies won 4-2. Dave Dombrowski, make Phillies a big deal before 6 p.m. tomorrow. I'm not sure it's going to be a big deal. I know every year, Dombrowski always tries to go for the big fish. He doesn't really care about prospects at all, pretty much for any team he's ever been a part of. We saw that Sherrington did a great job rebuilding the prospect depth for the Boston Red Sox, and basically in one season, Dombrowski came over and kicked it over like a sandcastle. And he did that with the Tigers. He's done that with every team he's ever been with. And it is about winning at the major league level, don't get me wrong. But he doesn't care one iota about his draft or about his prospects, about their future at all. He's heavily invested in winning now. And I don't think you have to worry about Dombrowski looking for that big deal. I just don't think there's one out there to be made for him. I guess the biggest fish on the pitching side would have to be a guy like Justin Verlander. I don't think they have any interest in that type of a trade. I don't think the Mets would trade him to him anyway. As far as the hitting side, there's not really a hitter that really solves any of their issues on the market, outside of maybe a corner outfield bat. Now, none of those guys that are available are really going to move the needle. The White Sox, according to Ken Rosenthal, are actually open to business for pretty much anybody right now. They're at least willing to talk about players like Dylan Cease, like Luis Robert. I still think it's highly unlikely that they move a guy like Cease. I think it's even more unlikely that they move a guy like Robert. Just doing the math on it, Robert isn't exactly the most healthy guy in the world, has 4 years left to control after this. The White Sox are going to value him through the roof, but he's probably the best hitter on the market, quote unquote, if you consider him on the market. But it's going to cost a pretty penny. My favorite team is the Texas Rangers. Just thinking of what they would have to give up just for Robert, they'd have to give up probably their 1 through 5 top prospects, or at least 5 of their top 10. That's the type of price it's going to take for an impact type of piece. So Dombrowski making a big deal for a guy like Robert, well, I think he would love to do it. I don't think he has the prospects to do it. I think he would do it instantly if he did. I just don't think they have the ability to, and I don't think there's they don't really have a target out there that they can really go for. Like I said yesterday, I think their best improvement they could hope for is just to straighten out Trey Turner. If they can get him back to being what he was in the World Baseball Classic just before the season started, I think they'd be getting the best player on the market right now, hands down. So just getting him right, I think, should be the top priority for Dave Dombrowski more than anything else, and then adding a corner outfield bat, maybe a bullpen piece as well. But other trades that we saw, the Reds added Sam Marmol and international spending money as well in exchange for a prospect in Joe Boyle. Reds adding to their bullpen a little bit here. I still think they're going to add one more starter. The Tigers have set a really high price on their starting pitching. That's why they have not moved yet. I think that's why the Orioles, they're holding out for that Orioles offer, hoping they can pry away one of those top prospects from that Orioles system. I don't think they're going to be able to do it. I think the price will ultimately drop as we get closer to the deadline. But one little bit of the surprising news is that the New York Yankees got a little bit of truth serum in them, a little bit at least. It sounds like they're at least willing to sell some of their pieces right now. Doesn't seem like they're going to really have the ammunition to really make a run here at the deadline. So instead of going out there and adding here at the deadline for pieces like Carlson, etc., it sounds like they're going to trade off guys who have expiring deals and just hope for the best. So if you're a Yankees fan, sorry, it just doesn't look like your ownership group or your front office believes in the current construction of this team. And who can really blame them? Judge has been injured for most of the year. Carlos Rodon as well. They haven't really played well outside of Aaron Judge, even when he has been healthy. And it's just a roster construction issue that, according to Joel Sherman, when we watched MLB Central this morning, that goes back all the way to the days of the Giancarlo Stanton trade. It's really hamstrung the team as far as the acquisitions that they can make. And they've really gone for a lot of power and not much athleticism, according to Sherman. And so I can see his argument. The trade for Joey Gallo, for instance, one of the worst trades Cashman has made as GM of the New York Yankees, trading away 4 prospects, 3 of which are in the major leagues right now for the Texas Rangers, and another one that's still progressing through the system. That trade just looks like an eyesore right now in that Yankees organization. Ezekiel Duran right now would easily fit in as their starting third baseman, as their starting left fielder. That's where Ezekiel Duran would fit right now, and that's just one of the pieces they traded away. I don't think that trade, in hindsight, was the best trade they could have made at the deadline. But again, hindsight is always 2020. The Yankees certainly, finally, it looks like they've gotten some truth serum into their front office, and they realize they don't necessarily have what it takes to make a run at October. We've seen them really struggle in the postseason the last few years against the Houston Astros. They haven't gotten any better over the last couple of years. This year is no exception. In fact, I think they're worse. We'll see what the Yankees do this offseason, but I think they could add some interesting prospects back to their system depending on who they ultimately trade. We'll dig in a little bit into the Yankees as far as the expiring deals that they could move off of that Major League roster. There has been some talk about Gleyber Torres going to the Miami Marlins. We'll keep our eyes posted for that one. Another trade that we did see today is that the Cubs did trade for Jeimer Candelario from the Nationals there. Good move for them. We thought that might be one move that happens. In fact, Dan O'Dowd actually predicted that one on MLB Network yesterday, that Candelario would be a great fit for them at third base to kind of solidify their lineup, and they go out there and they get it done. Welcome back, Ramon. Appreciate you for joining us. But really appreciate you guys joining us here today. It's been a lot of activity as far as trades. I'm expecting some more here tonight. I'm very curious to see what ultimately happens with Justin Verlander. So let's kind of dig in on some of the rumors that are happening right now. In case you guys are unfamiliar with the site is MLBTradeRumors.com. Great site to kind of keep all your ideas, all the different trade aspects that are going on around the deadline here. One bit of news, Alex Verdugo was put on the market yesterday by the Red Sox. Teams have called since then saying, hey, what would it take to get him? And apparently the Red Sox are basically saying, on second thought, we'd rather hold on to him. So Red Sox, they will sell a couple of pieces here at the deadline. Paxton and Duvall, the names most likely going out of town. But it sounds like they're going to hold on to Verdugo for at least the time being, even though he doesn't necessarily have a starting spot in their outfield as currently constructed. As we mentioned, the Red Sox just have too many pieces right now to get them all playing time. Yoshida, Duran are going to be in their outfield right now. Duvall, they don't really have space for him out there. Now, as you saw in our tagline, our title anyway, for this live here, is that we're looking at what could happen with Justin Verlander. That's pretty much where all eyes in the market are right now. Does he go to Houston? Will he forgive Jim Crane for his comments that he said after the season last year in regards to his contract, in regards to him as a pitcher himself? Will they be able to smooth that over, or does he ultimately go to the Dodgers? I think this ultimately ends up with him going to the Dodgers, but an interesting team to note is that the Texas Rangers, even after acquiring Max Scherzer and Jordan Montgomery, have at least checked in on the price of Justin Verlander after all the starters they have right now on their roster. The Rangers are absolutely going for it this year. It's going to be crazy to see what this rotation ultimately looks like after the deadline is over. But the Rangers are absolutely putting the pedal to the metal, and they still haven't given away their top prospects either. So they can really do any number of things still here at the deadline. I think they still need to add one more piece to that lineup after the injury to Jonah Heim. I think they just need to add just a hair more depth. We shall see what they ultimately do. Bullpen is another concern for them as well. Dodgers, as I mentioned, are still considered the favorite for Verlander, though. They already added Lance Lynn. I still think they're a possibility for Jack Flaherty, who has not moved as of yet. But Verlander is still in discussions as far as the trade deadline here. If the Mets ultimately decide to trade him, I think Justin Verlander would waive his no-trade pretty much instantly for wherever that trade would ultimately send him, because he wants to win. He wants to win now. And teams that are looking for a World Series type of run, I think, have the best chance to really land Justin Verlander. So you're looking at teams like the Braves on the National League side, even though I don't think they would go at the Verlander price point. I think those types of teams would probably be the best bets. Looking at the Dodgers in the National League, on the American League side, I think you're looking at the Houston Astros, the Texas Rangers. I don't think Minnesota really has the interest in going for another starter right now. I think they'd like some depth, sure, but I don't think they'd pay the premium for a guy like Verlander. I think they could use some guys in that lineup more than anything else in Minnesota. As for the American League East teams, we saw the Rays make a trade for a starter today. We'll check in on that one here in just a moment. They got a really good starter there, kind of under the radar there that nobody really saw coming. And then as far as the Baltimore Orioles, I think they're going to go a little bit cheaper here at the deadline. That's why they've been looking at those Tigers starters. Tigers have been playing hardball with them. We saw the Cardinals play hardball with the market up until yesterday. I wonder if the Detroit Tigers will take this all the way up until probably noon, 2 o'clock tomorrow, and then finally start dropping their price as they get within 3 hours of the deadline. But tomorrow's going to be a crazy day with trades, so make sure you hit that like and subscribe. We're going to be live for you guys all day tomorrow. Throughout the entire deadline. We'll probably cut this live off around 9:30 tonight in order to save my voice. It's going to be an 11-hour live for me tomorrow. So a lot of talking. Got to have enough of a voice to be able to do that for 11 hours. So make sure you send us your comments, top trade assets that your team has that you want to possibly spin for a deadline edition here. So let us know who your target is. If you're a Phillies fan, who do you want them to go for? It sounds like they're looking for a corner outfield bat. Canna's gone. There has been some discussions about Adam Duvall. There's been some discussions about Tyler O'Neill, Tommy Pham to a lesser extent. With the Blue Jays having the injury now to Bo Bichette, do they go ahead and get some insurance for him, bringing in a guy like Tim Anderson, like Mark suggests there? But make sure you say hello, drop us a like, subscribe to us here. It really does help us out. And so let's kind of continue here with some of the trade rumors that we've seen. We saw the Mole trade going to the Reds. Which prospect do you see going in a Verlander deal? If they eat the money that they did in a Scherzer type of deal, I think they could get a top 50 prospect and maybe one other prospect on top of that. I think Verlander's had a little bit better of a year right now, which is why I think the Mets are trying not to eat quite as much money and still see how high of a prospect they can get. And then after they get that level of prospect attained, I think that's when the Mets say, hey, I know you said you'd do this, but if we're willing to eat more money, would you be willing to do this untouchable prospect instead? That's what I think the holdup right now is in the Verlander discussions, that they're trying to play hardball a little bit since they realize they have the best starter on the market outside of Dylan Cease, who might actually be moved. Welcome in, Matthew. Appreciate you for joining us. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. Where do you think Justin Verlander is going to go? I still think, just like the rest of the market, he will ultimately end up a member of the LA Dodgers. I still think there are a few teams that are at least on the periphery. Houston, I think, is a very difficult sell to Justin Verlander because that has to be a discussion between Jim Crane, the owner of the Houston Astros, and Justin Verlander, straightening things out. Then you have to take into account that you have to get the right prospect package going from Houston to the New York Mets, and they don't have the prospects to trade that a team like the Dodgers or even the Rangers would if they decided to add yet another starter. I thought it was very interesting that we saw last night the Rangers checked in on Justin Verlander's price and then checked in again this morning on Justin Verlander's price. They're not just, hey, we're just doing due diligence here. What's it actually looking like? And then just hanging up and forgetting about it until the final hours of the deadline. And if he still hasn't moved, then checking in. No, it sounds like the Rangers are still being very active here at the deadline. I don't think that they're going to stop making calls until after the deadline is passed. I think that they're literally taking every single phone call that they can, checking in on every single target that they possibly can, multiple times a day. We saw that last night when they checked in on Verlander's price after the two starters they had acquired, and then again this morning with Justin Verlander. Now, I've been working all day. I haven't been by my phone all day. I haven't been able to check in on every single tweet that every single beat reporter's posted today. But we'll check in on some of the market here as we go along. But I still find it very interesting that the Rangers last night checked in on him and again this morning just to see what the market was looking like for Verlander. I would not be surprised at this point if they added that type of starter to their rotation. The Rangers are looking for blockbuster level moves, and I think a conversation between the owner of the Rangers, Ray Davis, and the owner, Steve Cohen, saying, hey, we've got a guy that's absolutely untouchable as far as a prospect in Evan Carter. We need an impact bat in our lineup. What do you think about doing a guy like Pete Alonso and Justin Verlander? You eat about $40 million of that, and we'll give you a top 6 prospect in all of baseball to put in your outfield starting next season. Now remember, Cohen is all about 2024 right now. He wants to still compete. Pete Alonso's got 1 year left on his deal after this one. He's had a little bit of a down year, has starting to show that he's got that bat coming back to life a little bit. Has one of the worst BABIPs in all of baseball for the first half of the season at 195. He's going to be a little bit better. But wow, what a trade that would be to be able to get the Mets, the number 1 prospect in the Rangers farm system, for Justin Verlander, who doesn't necessarily have great value outside of eating some money. If you do, then you could probably get a top 100 prospect. And then Pete Alonso, who's had a down year. If you package those two together, I think you could rocket all the way up there and get one of those top 10 prospects in the game from the Texas Rangers. So we shall see what happens. I think that would be, the coup de grace move for the Texas Rangers here at the deadline. Just kind of solves their need for a bat at that DH spot. Really gives them some thump. I don't think there's any reason why the Texas Rangers would not be considered a World Series favorite in the American League if they made that type of move. Is that the right decision, though, from a long-term perspective for the Texas Rangers? Would you give up the future of Evan Carter, who looks like at least a very good, productive role player in an offense, worst-case scenario, to a possible superstar in Evan Carter for a season and a half of Justin Verlander and maybe one more season after that, and a season and a half of Pete Alonso? Is it worth it for the future of Evan Carter? Just an interesting discussion to have, really. But yes, Ramon, Rangers absolutely do want it all. They are not holding back. Ray Davis spoke with reporters multiple times this season, basically pounding the table every single time. You think Steve Cohen was spending money like a madman this offseason, going out there trying to get Carlos Correa, going out there and getting Justin Verlander, re-signing his own guys? I think absolutely the Texas Rangers would do that type of a move right now if it was up to Ray Davis. We shall see. The Mets never trade Alonso. Well, I didn't think they would have traded Scherzer. And Scherzer's having a down year. They aren't the same. Alonso's a career Met. I get it. But he's got a year and a half left. He's not exactly looking like a cheap contract to be able to stay. Not that Cohen's going to end up being cheap. I just think it's an interesting discussion for the Rangers to have if they can convince Cohen that, hey, for 2024, Evan Carter will be on your major league team. Just an interesting discussion. Who's going to take Vogelbach? I don't think there's, a huge market for him. A bench bat is more than, more about what Vogelbach is going to be there. But welcome in, Vinny. Appreciate you for joining us. I don't think it's going to I think it's going to be a big trade. So who's going to take him? Rangers need a DH. If they don't get anything big, they could ultimately settle for that at the very last stroke of the deadline. But I don't think anybody's really going to be, pounding the table for Vogelbach here at the deadline, even though he was a nice addition last year for the Mets after the deadline. So I don't think he's anybody that any team out there is really pounding the table for or trying to acquire right now. We saw another trade for the Cubs and Royals. They traded some relievers. Jose Cuas goes to the Cubs in exchange for Nelson Velazquez. 1-for-1 swap. Cuas has had kind of an up and down year. Has a 4.8 or 4.08 ERA anyway. Will be kind of a middle relief, kind of a setup guy for the Cubs here around the deadline. I thought they would add a bullpen piece. I didn't think they'd spend big, and I don't think they did here. So nice addition there for the Cubs. Let's see here. Let me scroll down here. There was the Brewers trade acquiring Mark Canha from the Mets. Again, they ate quite a bit of money in this deal. I think the Mets are actually playing the entire thing, aside from the prorated league minimum. Okay. Although they will be on the hook for the buyout or the option next season. Okay. Makes sense. Kind of want to get to that Savali trade. Here's the Giants trade, kind of adding to their outfield mix here. Mark Mathias has kind of bounced around over the last couple of years now. Hopefully finds a home out there in San Francisco. Pollock has had kind of an up and down last couple of years. We'll see if he ultimately kind of sparks some offense for them. They had to kind of clear some room, transferred some guys on the DL to make room for it. But good move here, kind of a depth addition here for the Giants. Not really going to push them over the top, I think, in the wild card discussion, but I think it at least solidifies some of their needs here at the deadline with some good hitters there. Remember, Mathias last year for the Rangers was very good after the deadline. Kind of wasn't as good, obviously, this year with the Brewers, and ultimately found his way to the Mariners. Now he finds his way to the Giants. For Pollock, remember he was with the LA Dodgers a couple of years ago, went to the White Sox in that Craig Kimbrell deal, found his way to the Mariners this offseason and now to the Giants here. A couple of guys who kind of moved around that if they could at least give you some professional at-bats for San Francisco. Paul Sewald goes to the Diamondbacks. They get three prospects anyway. They get Rojas, Canzoni, and Ryan Bliss. One of the top bullpen arms. Curious to see the overall return here. Let's see where they ranked. Upper level hitters is what they were seeking, is what they ultimately got, is what it looks like. Rojas, 29, is the most well known. 29 years old, not a big prospect there, obviously. Not a prospect at all at 29, in my opinion. Come on, that's a lot of discussion for Rojas, a 29-year-old. All right, let's see. They're saying they're going to try Canzoni in the outfield mix since they traded away Pollock. See if they can get him to hit. And then they get the 21 second-round pick in Bliss. So Bliss probably the best prospect of the group that they're getting. Ranked him number 16 in the Arizona farm system. Remember, the Mariners and Diamondbacks have gotten together on a few trades over the last couple of years. Ketel Marte comes to mind. Here's the Candelario deal, a couple of prospects there. Candelario going to take over at third base. Give him some good professional at-bats at that third base spot. Welcome back, Hank. Do you think the Yankees will actually trade some of their players? Yes, I do. Matthew, I think they're probably going to trade 3 or 4 of them at this point. I think Gleyber Torres is probably out of town right now, probably going to go to the Marlins. They're hoping to try to get Cabrera from the Marlins. I'm not sure if that's going to happen. No Padres news as of yet, unfortunately, Cobra. But we shall see if they ultimately decide to sell or buy here at the deadline. I don't think that they're going to buy if I had to pick, or if I had to pick an option there. Taj Bradley just got optioned by the Rays. I really want to look at this Savali move. There it is. Okay. Rays and Guardians got into a good trade here today. Savali's had a nice year. Has a couple years left to control after this year as well. Is only 28. He goes to Tampa Bay, who's already found really good ways of helping who've always found really good ways of helping their rotation or bullpen. Tampa Bay is really good as far as juggling their pitching staff. So if Tampa Bay is interested in your pitcher, you need to have a second thought about, hey, is this the right decision to trade the guy? So for Aaron Savali to go from a Guardians team who needs some pitching right now to go to the Rays, I think this is a very interesting sign for the Guardians as to what they think of their season right now. As far as the trade here, looks like top first base prospect is going back to Cleveland. We saw this earlier a few years ago with the Guardians and Rays making a trade. Yandy Diaz was one of the top prospects headed to the Rays in that trade. Obviously, I think the Guardians would love to have Yandy Diaz back at this point, but kind of the reversal of the type of trade there. I think that the Guardians got the pitcher in that type of a trade at that point where Diaz went to the Rays, if I remember correctly. Now it's kind of a reversal of fortune. Savali goes to the Rays where they get the prospect back. There's always an upside. Yes, there is. I hear they're in on Verlander, but now I think the Dodgers might get him. I'm not buying the Padres really being in on anybody that's a big target here at the deadline. They're too far back to really consider themselves a serious threat for the wild card, which is why I think there's a better chance that they stand pat. Are they far enough back to consider themselves sellers? For the Yankees, sounds like they consider themselves a little bit of a seller, even though they're closer to the wild card. Meanwhile, the Padres, a little further out, they got a lot of inexperience ahead of them in the standings. You're talking about teams like the Giants, the Reds, the Diamondbacks, the Cubs, all teams who haven't been there over the last few years. And maybe the Padres just think they're a better team. They do have better pieces, that's for sure, but they haven't been able to get out of their own way. Maybe they've corrected the ship, and we'll see. Is Goldschmidt available? I think if you overwhelmed the Cardinals, you could at least have an interesting conversation. Do I think he's available? No. If Arenado isn't, Goldschmidt probably isn't. I don't think Arenado's available, but I think there's an outside chance if Arenado wants to be moved, I think the Cardinals will ultimately move him. I don't think Arenado wants out of St. Louis. I don't think that's the case. I just think if he were to be traded, he would accept a trade to L.A. was what the article said the other day. I don't think that he's necessarily going to be moved. However, only 4.5 back now in the wild card. That is true. However, like I said, you got a lot of teams in front of you. Manuel, welcome in. What is a better move for the Dodgers, Verlander or Ohtani? Ohtani in the offseason for sure. Verlander, I think they could get right now. I think they could do both. I don't think there's a world where they have to do one or the other. Now, if your statement is, do they think they should go after Ohtani now? That's not happening. The Angels aren't trading him right now. They're all in on this season. They're trying to compete right now. The dreams of everybody, hoping to get Ohtani here at the deadline, those have long since passed. He is not going to be traded. I know that's kind of what the theme was built up for here at the trade deadline, is that they'd make the right decision as far as from a baseball perspective and move him, but they chose to not do so. So I think the Dodgers ultimately will get him in free agency. I think they're going to be able to outbid, I think, everybody. That's why they chose not to bring back guys like Trey Turner or any of their other starters that they've lost over the last couple of years, or re-sign Corey Seager. They wanted to be able to be available to sign a guy like Shohei Ohtani. They wanted to have that $60 million offer per year that they could offer him, and I think they're going to ultimately get their guy. But as we mentioned earlier at the top of the show, Bo Bichette went down due to injury today. It sounds like they're going to have to add somebody here at the deadline. I'm just not sure what option they ultimately decide to go with. But I think it's very curious to see what ultimately happens with Tim Anderson with the Chicago White Sox. The biggest news this morning, anyway, was that the Chicago White Sox were at least listening on guys like Dylan Cease and Luis Robert. I'm very curious to see if a team goes out there and really overwhelms the White Sox for Dylan Cease. With as many teams that need starting pitching that's out there, I know the Tigers have set a really high price for Eduardo Rodriguez and Michael Lorenzen. What about those teams that are trying to contact the Tigers for those guys? And those are rentals, by the way, and not nearly at the level of a Dylan Cease. What if they say, hey, we don't necessarily want to play the Tigers game here and give up our top prospects for a guy who's not going to be around after the season? Why don't we just go to Chicago and see what ultimately will cost? Sure, it will ultimately cost more than what they'd have to trade to the Tigers, but in for a penny, in for a pound, as they say. So we'll see what they end up doing. I think that there's a decent chance Dylan Cease gets moved before the deadline. Say about a week ago, I'd probably put the odds at Dylan Cease being moved at about 20%. I'd probably put that around 50-50 right now, just because of how many teams need starting pitching, and he's a difference-making starter, even though he's not having a great season this year. You think about what the Rangers saw in Max Scherzer. I think the teams out there see Dylan Cease in a very similar light, who's having a down year, but has the potential within him to be one of the aces of your staff in a Game 1 starter in a postseason series. Do you think that Emmett Sheehan is all the Mets need to trade away for Justin Verlander? Possibly, but I think it's going to ultimately come down to what the other teams are willing to offer for Justin Verlander. I think that you're probably going to get Sheehan from the Dodgers and maybe one other piece if you eat something like $36 million of that type of a deal. Maybe a trade of Sheehan and Stone. If you eat $36+ million. I think the question around Verlander right now is what are they going to do with that mutual option for 2025? Because if he pitches 140 innings next year, that option will become a player option, I believe, and then it probably gets picked up at that point. I think it's for, $35 million for that final season. I think there's going to have to be some discussions with those teams that are looking to acquire him as to whether or not they're going to go ahead and have that option turned into a guaranteed year, and how much of that are the Mets going to pick up. Does that in turn change what prospect you're going to get back in return? There's a lot of discussions financially that are going to have to be worked out, much like we saw with the Max Scherzer deal that basically started around 3 p.m. is when the deal took off, when we saw the players were agreed to, and then the money and the no trade clause took another, 12 to 18 hours to really sort out, to finally get the financial aspects hammered out. That's why I think something's going to have to happen tonight as far as the player side of it for Verlander. And so stick around. Maybe later on tonight we could get some headlines about Justin Verlander. And then probably really close to the deadline is when it finally gets done, because they've gotten this far down the road. I'm just curious if the Mets ultimately move him. Fam reunion with Padres would be cool. True, I'm just not sure they're going to go out there and buy even as low of a cost as Fam would ultimately cost for the Padres. I think they just need to stand pat or sell some of their sell some of their rental pieces like Hader and Snell. I think those are the two possibilities. To add here at the deadline, I don't think that's the right decision for the Padres, but we've been proven wrong before. They went all in and got Juan Soto last year. They've gone all in on a number of different pieces, spending money in the offseason on guys like Machado and Bogarts and Hosmer over the last several years. But Padres have done a good job of surprising us. Maybe they'll have another surprise in store for us today. Let's kind of refresh our page, see if anything else is really happening as of right now. Oh, come on, that's too slow. Let's go all the way to the top. Nothing there. Let's check out Twitter just to see if anything is breaking. Doesn't look like it. Oh, there's a Castrovins trade. What did he have to say? There it is. All right, making fun of the Savali trade is what he was trying to do. Okay, let's have some fun, shall we? As far as the AL Central, just on that Castrovins comment, basically the trade for Savali to the Rays, basically punting is what the article basically was talking about that you saw pop up there for a moment. The Guardians right now sit in second place in the AL Central. The Central, though, isn't exactly the best of the American League. The best teams in the American League all come from other divisions. In fact, the entire American League East has an argument to be better. In fact, the American League West, the Rangers, the Astros, the Angels, maybe even the Mariners would consider themselves a better team than the Twins, who lead that division. The Guardians really haven't played well all year. They've already traded away Rosario, brought in Noah Syndergaard. Now they trade Savali away. They weren't exactly going to win that division, and even if they did, they weren't going to make noise in the postseason. I really like how they've done their organization. They've got a lot of contact hitters. They do it a little bit differently than what other organizations currently do it, where you look at the Yankees, all they try to do is hit the long ball. They have zero athleticism, like we spoke about in the Open. But a team like the Indians, they're all about contact hitters. They have very few power hitters in their lineup. They tried adding a couple, and it just didn't work out this year. And so I think the Guardians kind of recognize that this is the time where they could really add to their prospect depth, really try to reset things for them. Maybe this is the time we could see them move a guy like Clase from their bullpen. Wouldn't have said his name as being one of the guys available here at the deadline yesterday, but after the trade of Savali, maybe we could see him be moved. Now, he's having a little bit of a down year as well. We'll check in on his numbers a little bit. Actually, let's do that right now. Let me pull them up. Darn ads. I want to look at some of their pitching stats here for Emmanuel Clase. There he is. Let's look at his numbers, shall we? Looks like he's improved. Remember, he had a 4 ERA earlier this season. He's still 1-5 on the season. 28 saves, 43 strikeouts. That's a low strikeout number for Clase, though. 2.96 ERA. Maybe he's learning to throw a little bit more as far as become more of a pitcher. He's got 3 saves in his last 7 innings pitched, 6 strikeouts in 7 innings. His whip is really, really low over those 7 outings, though. That's got to give you at least some thought that he's kind of figuring things out. Let's kind of look at his last few games to be specific. Pitched last night. Gave up 1 hit, no strikeouts. Struggled a little bit against the White Sox there. He's got a 4.5 ERA in the month of July. June, he had a .77 earned run average. Look at that's more of the Clase that we know. 16 strikeouts in 11 2/3 innings. My head's in the way of that one. There's the 16 strikeouts you can see. And 11 2/3 innings. That's more of the Emmanuel Clase that we've come to know. But this is more about what we've been getting all season. 10 innings pitched, 7 strikeouts, and a 4.5 ERA. He's still going to cost a pretty penny, don't get me wrong, but he's not Josh Hader. He's not David Bednar this year, and teams who need bullpen help are looking for good relievers that are good this season. Bullpen guys are notoriously mercurial. One year they'll have a sub-2 ERA. The next year it'll be over 5. The next year after the 5 it'll be back down to 2.5. The year after that it'll be over 4. Then it'll be under a 1.5 ERA. Then it'll balloon to a 6. It's just the way bullpens seem to go. I guess you'd be banking on the future a little bit with Clase, control, all those kinds of things. I think the Guardians would be able to still get a pretty penny for him, even in a down year. But I don't think that teams that are interested in buying him would consider him in the class of a guy like Hader or Bednar right now if those guys get moved at the deadline. But as I said, let's get some fun trade ideas here. We mentioned at the top that we were going to talk a little bit about the New York Yankees and who they could ultimately move. Let's look at their Major League roster right now. We're going to look at the years of control left. So these are the guys that are left or that have expiring contracts this year. You're looking at Bader, Donaldson, IKF, McLean, Montas, Peralta, and Severino. Now, who could they move? IKF could be a guy that is moved. He's kind of got a utility infield type of a role. I think he could fill pretty much any team's need at the deadline as kind of a bench type player, defensive replacement late in games. Is he going to be a difference maker for you? Probably not. But he could be a piece that might get you, an outside the top 30 type prospect. You look at Donaldson, it's all about the bat and how much the Yankees are willing to eat on that salary. You look at the Texas Rangers, Donaldson would represent a good addition to their team just from a power hitting perspective. Donaldson, when he does get hot, really can carry an offense for a week, 2 weeks. But then you get those weeks where he strikes out 18 times out of 25 at-bats. And that's the Donaldson that you really don't want. Or grounds into double play after double play after double play. That can be a little bit of abrasive kind of a guy in the locker room as well. Not sure he'd be the right deadline addition for anybody out there, but if you need a bat, teams get desperate here at the deadline, and they might be willing to take a chance on a guy who's been a good postseason performer in the past. Severino, I think he's got a little bit left in that arm. I'm not sure he would go for anything more than maybe a top 25, top 30 prospect somewhere in there, but you're not talking about a top 20 prospect or anything like that. So I think the cost for Severino to acquire him is not going to be that high. So if you need a depth type addition to your bullpen, long relief guy, number 5 type starter, those guys are all usually interchangeable anyway. If you need somebody to fill that type of role for you, Severino could be the guy for you. But as far as the guys that have a little bit of control left on the Yankees anyway, that's when you get into guys like Rizzo, you get into Holmes, Higashioka, Herman, Cordero, etc. I don't think they're going to move those type of players. They could move a bullpen arm like a Canely. They could move Loaizinga, see if they could get something for him. I just don't think they're going to move guys with some control left. I think they're going to sell very small pieces off of this roster. I don't think they're going to trade, guys like Aaron Judge or aircraft carriers on this team. Those types of players. I just don't think it's going to happen. You look at the negative value guys like Stanton, LeMahieu, Rodon. I just don't think that they have the wherewithal to eat enough money to make it worth trading any of those pieces. But I've been proven wrong before, but we'll see. Watching some Guardians and Astros highlights real quick, just seeing what happens here. Guardians playing well against Houston on the road. 2-0 lead there in the 6th, and then dang, nice play by their pitcher. But kind of that gives you an idea where the Yankees stand here at the deadline. Do I think they're going to do anything major? Like I said, I don't think they will. About to call it here in a few minutes. Hopefully we get some more big trades here in the next couple of days or next couple of hours. But Justin Verlander is the one I would keep my eyes peeled for. And then as far as the Chicago White Sox situation, I think a team will likely make a legitimate offer to the White Sox for Dylan Cease. The question will become, what do they ultimately do with Dylan Cease and Luis Robert? For the Mets, do they stop at trading the pieces they've already traded, or do they go even further and trade Verlander? Do they trade Alonso? Do they trade Rayleigh? Do they trade Pham? All those other pieces that they have here to sell. World Series predictions. My World Series predictions before the season are garbage. The only one that really has a chance to still make it there would be the Toronto Blue Jays. The Padres, I don't think, have any prayer of making it to the World Series. But right now, for both sides, I just think I take this with a grain of salt. I am a Rangers fan, so I'm going to go ahead and put the Rangers there. Kind of hard to root against them, honestly, because I am a Rangers fan. But what they've done with that starting rotation, I really like what they've done, and they're still not done. I think they're going to add at least one more piece here at the deadline. I think they need one more bat. I would not be surprised if it was either a corner outfielder or a catcher, depending on the health of Jonah Heim. And then as far as the bullpen goes, they've got 7 starters right now. They're going to probably move a couple of those after Eovaldi comes back and is healthy. They're going to move a couple of those to the bullpen and really kind of give themselves some good options in that bullpen as far as long relievers. Heaney's been good for 3-4 inning stints, but then he blows up after that point. Same thing for Perez. Same thing for Gray. If you can get to 2-3 good innings out of those guys and then piggyback them like they did earlier this season with Jacob deGrom, and then if deGrom left after, say, 3 innings with an injury, they'd put Dane Dunning in. Dunning would throw 4 innings scoreless. That's the formula that really worked in April for Texas. I wonder if that's kind of what they're trying to do right now. That and go with a 6-man rotation just until everybody gets healthy. Sounds like they were trying to skip everybody at least once in the one time through the rotation as well, just to make sure they were fresh for October. So I really like what the Rangers have done in the back end of their bullpen, bringing in Chapman. Really like the Stratton addition for their bullpen as well. Grant Anderson was just brought back up. They just DFA'd Barlow. I think he could be a nice player for whoever he ultimately goes to, or if he passes through waivers, Rangers would be more than happy to hold on to him. Does have that former closing experience with the Rangers from a couple of seasons ago. But on the American League side, like I said, I have to pick the Rangers there. If I had to pick a team other than Texas, I'm not going to pick Houston. It's not because I'm not and it's not because I'm a Rangers fan and I hate the Astros or whatever. I just don't think the Astros have enough to really get there. They need some starting pitching. If they get Verlander, then we can talk. But as of right now, if I had to pick a second team, if I had to rule out the Rangers, since I do have them as my favorite team, I would probably go with Baltimore, and that's assuming they add one starter. Tampa Bay's been very good. The addition of Savali, I think, really puts their pitching over the top. But when we get into October, I think the hitters for Baltimore hit really good pitching, and I think they're going to have a great time going up against that Tampa Bay pitching staff. Pitching wins, I get it. I just think the Rays have played way above their heads this year. They are a good team. I just don't buy into the power that they gained in April and May. We saw those power numbers really drop over the past month. The disciplinary action they took on Wander Franco, I think, was an absolute mistake for both team and player. I think this might sour the relationship for him long term with the Rays. Not that that's important to them, because they'll probably trade him anyway at some point. But we'll see. On the National League side, I'm going to go with the Braves. They just seem to be the team of destiny this year on the National League side. I don't think they really need to do anything major to make their team that much better than all the rest of the National League teams combined. The one team that really that might be able to hold a candle to them is the Dodgers. I'm not just basing this on record either. I just don't think the teams on the National League side really have the momentum to really even compete with teams like the Dodgers and the Braves right now. But the Dodgers, I think, are one step below. They really took a step back as far as total overall talent on the team. If the Dodgers get Verlander, then we can have a discussion about them being a little bit better than the Braves. But as things stand right now, my pick for the National League side would be Braves. So 2 of my favorite teams go to the World Series. The Rangers have pretty much always been my favorite team, and then the Braves ultimately would go as well. And I think everybody cheered for the Braves because they were the team that was broadcast nationally on TBS for all those years. So I always have some affection for that team. But just look at the talent on there. Acuna, Albies, Riley, Olsen, and we haven't even talked about their pitching staff. They're going to add Max Fried back at some point as well. They're still looking to add another starter. I think they could add one bullpen piece here as well. Really like the additions that they've made to kind of supplement their infield. I think they could use a corner outfield bat if they decide to go that route. They've been connected with Adam Duvall, but they don't really need to do anything major right now here at the deadline. I think more about just adding depth to their team, giving them some versatility, giving them some different looks for a postseason lineup, all those kinds of things really might help out the Braves, kind of win one extra game. But none of these moves really are going to move the needle one way or the other for the Braves in my estimation, which is why even if they stand pat, I would still pick the Braves to win the National League as it currently stands. Really like what they've done this season. They just look like a team of destiny on the NL side. Like I said, the American League side, it's just hard not to look at the Rangers and say, hey, with the American League's best offense for the first couple of months, they've really regressed over the past month and change. They're going to get those bats back, especially once Corey Seager gets back in the lineup. The bigger question for them this season is going to be about Jonah Heim. Will he be able to come back? Can their catching hold up? If it doesn't, then I think we could see the Baltimore Orioles really make a nice run and make it to the World Series. If it's the Rangers and Braves who make it to the World Series, come on, I have to pick the Rangers. If it's Baltimore and Atlanta, I'd probably pick Atlanta. But there's my World Series predictions for you guys. Really appreciate you guys joining us here tonight. We'll be live for you guys all day tomorrow, starting at 8 a.m. So make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Really do appreciate the support we've gained over the last week or two. Gained almost 20 subscribers in the past few days. So good on you guys for hitting that like and subscribe. No new headlines there. We'll double check Twitter one more time just to see if anything else is breaking. And doesn't look like it. Angels got a nice win over Atlanta today. But overall, should be a very interesting 24 hours. So again, deadline is tomorrow. We'll be live for you guys starting at 8 a.m. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe. Follow us on Twitter at UpsideSN. And we'll be sure to notify you when we do go live. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. We'll see you guys early tomorrow. Get some rest. Get some drinks. I'm going to try to rest my voice for you guys tomorrow. We'll go through every single trade that's already happened tomorrow. Kind of go through, kind of trade deadline winners and losers after the deadline passes. Give you some updated World Series predictions, division predictions as well, wild card predictions. Kind of give you a bracket of what we think what it'll ultimately look like. And then for the second half of the season, we're going to get back to doing some live baseball games for you guys here at the Upside. So make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. NFL training camps are underway. We'll try to bring you some NFL action as well on Sundays this fall. So thank you guys for joining us. Oh, and one last programming note before I forget. The fantasy football drafts that we did last year, we will have a return of those in August as well. Yes, I'm definitely going to need some rest. Working as long as I did, as crazy a day as it was at work. Anyway, that's beside the point. Very excited to just get into baseball tomorrow. It's going to be a fun day and absolutely need to get that rest. But we'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you guys for joining us. Matthew, Cobra, Manuel, Mark, really appreciate you guys for joining us. And we'll see you guys tomorrow.